Hello.
Hello.
Hello, it's Books at Lunchtime, and I'm Tracy, and we're still at Kett's Books, and I'm with Lynne, who's one of our very long-term volunteers, and we're delighted to have the author Alison Bruce here with us today to talk about her book, The Moment Before Impact. That's not the only book she's written. She's got quite a few crime books under her belt, but that's the most recent, and welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Would you like to tell us about your book? Oh, show us your book.
Here it is.
I'm afraid we've sold all of our copies.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. First of all, starting with the cover, because that's what everybody looks at first, isn't it? I have to say this is my favourite so far. I was in the position where this got designed before I'd written the book. I'd just written the synopsis. So the cover designer did the cover based on the synopsis. And then I got the post one day, and in it was this poster-sized version of this cover. So I put it up on the desk in front of me while I was writing the book to make the words that go inside it, you see. So I did feel that I had to do the cover justice.
Wow.
You didn't panic at any point and want to rewrite a different novel.
I didn't want to rewrite. I didn't want to write a different novel, but I did panic a bit because it suddenly seems there's a weight of expectation when you see the cover and you haven't got the words to go with it. So there was a bit of me that was going, oh, this is scary. But no, I did fill it up in the end. It's my second standalone. It's set in Cambridge. All my books are set in Cambridge. But this follows on from, I did a series of 7, the Gary Goodhue series, and then a standalone a couple of years ago, and this is the second standalone. And it's the story of the sort of 3 main characters in a way. But the main character is a girl called Nikki, who is responsible for, she's driving when a car crashes with terrible results. And this then moves forward till about 3 years later, when she suddenly has a realization that all might not have been what it seemed. Okay. So that's what it's about.
The book has been described, I mean, the sort of strapline I've seen is a terrible car accident or a calculated murder. So they're obviously sort of wanting, that's not a spoiler, because that's what I think is going with all the publicity, isn't it?
Yeah, it's always difficult to know how much to say, because you never want to give away, because you don't know what a reader is going to imagine might be about to happen next. So you don't want to spoil anything, but the accident is fairly upfront in the book. So, it's fine to let people know about that. I can't let them know any spoilers though, apart from that.
In some ways, if somebody's a bit squeamish about the potential of, the car accident, actually, then they know they can get that over and done with, and then they get on to actually perhaps the crime story. I don't know.
Well, yes, I don't tend to write very gory books, but I will have the odd moment. And there is the odd half page here that, if you were a little bit on the squeamish side, there's the odd page where you go. In fact, Rankin read that bit, and he said, I'm still recovering afterwards. So
well, that's nice.
I was quite proud of that, really. I think the things that are in it that people might consider to be gory, they're obviously it's fiction. I've made up the storyline itself, but they are actually really well researched. So with a pathologist, so people can read it and know that they're accurate. And I don't know if that makes it better or worse from the squeamish point of view, actually.
I don't know, but I think that's actually an important principle. And just for a minute, harking back to your Cambridge or the DC Goodhue series set in Cambridge. And I remember when you were talking to us before at an event for Mulbarton Words, you were stressing then how you felt such a responsibility to write accurately about Cambridge, because people would be looking at the details and they would be, wanting it to be right.
When you're writing fiction, you're creating a pretend world, and then you've got to draw the lines about where reality meets fiction. And when you get something wrong, it shatters the moment. We've all had it, when we've been watching something, we think, oh, well, that's ridiculous, and suddenly you're not in the moment of watching the film or reading the book anymore. So, you know, I'm trying to avoid that as far as possible. And so my approach has been with Cambridge to really, if it's something historic, obviously research it well. If it's something that is to do with what people will see as they walk around town, I walk around town and I make sure that I know hopefully Cambridge, or that particular bit of Cambridge, as well as a local would. And even makes me really happy if somebody says, I've lived in Cambridge all my life and I never noticed such and such, because they've obviously read it, they've gone, really? And then gone and checked it out and gone, oh yes. Yeah. And that's really important to me. But it's also really important to me to get a lot of the other elements right. I do understand that you can't write a police investigation exactly as it would be in real life, because we'd have loads more officers than you could possibly keep tabs on in one book, and they'd all be doing, you know, little parts of a big job. So, you know, that you have to suspend disbelief in that sort of area. But I really like to, if I think a criminal has a particular mindset, for example, I like to research that and find examples of in real life cases where people have behaved in a certain way, so I can see parallels. So I'm writing something that I've made up, but it's based on actual behaviors and you know, actual psychology. And so when you get to the crux of it with this case here, it was partly inspired by a real case in the States that I read about. So there's all of that. Also, you know, one of the things I've really loved is doing all the research to do with pathology and forensics. And I'm lucky because I've got a senior pathologist who will always help answer questions, and we have chats about, I mean, in this book it was a lot to do with seatbelt injuries. We had a lot of discussion about what was viable, where the red herrings could be and couldn't be, because you know, they might not hold up to scrutiny. And actually I read a crime book a few months ago, and just by coincidence it had in the denouement was a lot of the same kind of stuff, but I was reading and I was going, that's impossible and that's impossible. And which for me, I suppose, you know, meant that actually I'd enjoyed the book up to that point, and then it became unbelievable because it was just impossible what was being described. But it led me to take a degree in crime and investigation, which I finished earlier this year. Wow. And so I've sort of, I take my research as far as I can, conceivably, you know.
Wow, I think that's excellent, isn't it? That also means, I assume, that you are going to carry on writing crime. You haven't felt at this stage that you want to, you know, move into another genre as well, not necessarily instead of.
Yeah, I would like to write something that's not a crime book. It's an ambition of mine, and I've got a few different plots outlined, but to date I've never managed to write something without murdering somebody. So even when I've set off with one intention, it's just all turned into blood and guts by about page 4.
But it's interesting how popular crime fiction is at the moment, isn't it? And I think there are different levels of crime fiction, and it's something that we talk about quite a lot in the shop and with our customers. But it is a really popular genre, and I mean, we'll come on to talk about Ellie Griffiths in Rankin and others in a minute. But I have got a pressing question though. What about Gary Goodhue? Is he going to come back?
Well,
I should say DC Gary Goodhue, to be fair.
A long time ago, when I knew there were going to be 7 books, I plotted not the details of the 7, but I knew where his story arc was going to be and where I would be leaving him at the end of book 7. And I never wanted to keep writing a series until it became stale. Mm-hmm. You know, I didn't want it to become Goodhue by numbers kind of thing. So I knew I would stop there. But I mean, if anyone's read the 7th book, you'll know that there's an opening for more. Mm-hmm. So I thought, you know, I'll leave it to go fallow or whatever for a while until I see what comes to mind. And I've actually got the outline for 2 more Goodhue novels. So I am hoping to return to him later. And as part of my, I've got a new book deal coming, and part of that will be that there'll be reissuing the Goodhue books in a couple of years' time. So that would be a good time for there to be a new Goodhue book alongside that, really. But that's a way off at the moment.
Well, I think people will be pleased to hear that as well, won't they? I think that's it's nice to have that to look forward to.
Yeah.
Because and I suppose actually, if we do now sort of think, we do perhaps make that parallel with Ellie Griffiths. She's done very much the same, hasn't she? She's had obviously a long-running series, but actually she's wanted to now write a couple of sort of standalone books as well. So I think it's probably just important in terms of, I don't know, perhaps inspiration, motivation.
It's a mix of things. I mean, part of you, I think, if you do a series for too long, you wonder if you can write anything else because you're locked into that mindset. But also, you know, there's nothing like writing one book to think that writing a completely different book's a really good idea. And you know, it's the grass is greener thing, especially when you're in the middle section of a novel and it feels like however many words you write, you somehow never get any closer to the end. You get to this bit in the middle of the book that's you know, it's quite a mountain to overcome, really. And when you're in the middle of that, the one thing that's really appealing is the book that you can't yet start. So you have ideas then, and I think you can have ideas then that are impossible for your series detective. So the last book I wrote, for example, was in a first person point of view, and it wouldn't have worked for being a Goodhue book. So you know, you do get these books that are, if only I could write that book, out there. So it's exciting to go off and do something that's, I was going to say completely different. It's not completely different because it's still crime, but you know, it's from a different angle. And maybe, you know, with Ellie's Ruth Galloway series, you know, she's obviously gone and written something in a different time period that wouldn't have been possible with Ruth. Or, you know, it might just be as simple as thing as something that's more light-hearted or darker, or something that just doesn't quite fit where your series is, and to have that flexibility to go off and do something else is exciting.
When is the book in paperback? It's in the
this
new
one
year,
this one again.
Yes, it comes out in paperback in January?
March, I think it is.
March.
I think it's March. Yeah.
Right, okay, so
things change because this was going to be January, and then it got brought forward to October. So things do sometimes move around a bit, but I believe it's March.
Right. Okay, brilliant. And in case someone's looking at that as a Christmas gift, how much is that?
This book is £20.99.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's not the cheapest hardback.
No, but looks like it has several pages.
It has more than 2 pages. It's got a unique title. I believe it's the only book with this title. Yes. And it's got very nice artwork.
It's beautiful.
So yeah, so it's not just a book that you put like that, you can put it like this.
Yes.
And it still looks nice. So I think it's actually not bad value for money after all.
It's a piece of art.
It is.
Brilliant. Would you like to, if once someone has read that and enjoyed it, what would you recommend that they read? You've given us a list, actually. Shall we hold some books up at the screen and you can tell us about them?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Mike Craven. Now, Mike Craven is, I think he's one of these authors, people will either see that book and go, I know exactly who he is and I've read them all, or who is that? I've never heard of him, right? I think there's less and less people in the who I haven't heard of him bracket. He's a fantastic author. His main character is Washington Poe, and who has a sidekick called Tilly. There's always a bit of banter on Twitter. I'm Team Tilly, so I see them as Tilly books rather than Poe books. And I've got another one of them, the curator just behind me. They're a great read, really well written, and the only thing is you'll have to put down everything else, because once you start, you just have to sit with the book till the end. Yeah,
that is the trouble with some of these crime books, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
especially when there are short chapters. You know, books used to have longer chapters, and you know, a lot of people don't get much. They read in short bursts. You know, they're on the train or on the tube and they're waiting for a bus, so, or you're nearly asleep, so you flick forward and you think, how far is it to the end of the chapter? And if it's sort of 20 pages, you think, oh, don't want to leave it in the middle, but that's a long way to read. But you know, a lot of these crime books have 3 or 4 page chapters, and you go, oh, I'll read to the end. Oh, I can start the next chapter. Oh, I'll read the next chapter. And you end up reading twice as much by accident. So, and I think a lot of the books I'm recommending, I would say all of them are in the bracket of be careful when you pick them up, because you might burn the dinner because you won't be putting them down. So.
Excellent. That's a good sign of a good book, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. Well, Ian Rankin, who has given a fantastic compliment to your own book, hasn't he? Because I think he's actually described it as tense, twisty, and terrific, and said something about you're always good value, I think he said.
Even at $20.99, see. So yes, another fantastic book from Ian. I think, you know, Ian's books, you know, sometimes you think, well, I've only got so much time to read books, and because we're all busy, aren't we? I've only got so much time to read books, so you want to bet on a dead cert. So for me, that's what Ian Rankin's books always are, an absolute dead cert. And I love the cover of this, because I don't know if you can see, but it's a song for dark times. But yes, there we are. The bird that's in the middle by the O, I don't think this is deliberate, but I think the wings look like hands of a clock. So I think it's got a really clever cover there. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, I can see this. Well, I'm good. This is one that I'm going to look forward certainly to reading soon. Yeah. So
you've mentioned Ellie Griffiths a few times, and she seems to be a favourite of everyone. So
yeah, I haven't read this yet. I'm recommending it because everybody who has read it says it's fantastic. I love Ellie's writing.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to be a winner. And yeah, the reviews have been. I was on the radio the other day, actually, on Cambridgeshire radio, and they had it as their book of the week, and they couldn't say enough about it. So I think that's good Christmas present material, that one.
And it even doesn't it even look in the right colours?
It is.
It does. Yes. It's festive. That's sit by the fire and read that one.
It is. And it has a happy ending, as much as a crime book does.
Right. Okay. So that's because I've not read this one either yet. And this is the thing, actually, I think we're in a very good moment for crime fiction, aren't we, at the moment? Yeah. Actually, there is a wealth of good writing in crime. So actually, you know, for people that do enjoy not necessarily just crime fiction, but you know, that generally, it's a question actually of fitting books in, isn't it?
Yes, and crime fiction has appealed to a really wide range of ages. I know I've got readers who are, in some families, 3 generations of the same family read my books, and husband and wife readers as well, which is always nice. But the general rule of thumb is the more troublesome the world is, the better crime, the more popular crime is. Yes. And I think it's because, you know, you have a problem, it's awful, it's happening to somebody else on the pages. So you can relate to it, but you're not actually threatened by it. And then you get to the end and you normally get quite a nice sense of closure, as if there's people out there fixing the world. So it's quite a comforting thing, however many people get bumped off during the process. And, you know, you said about the Postscript Murders having a happy ending. You know, quite often I feel quite happy at the end of the book if nobody's happy, but the right person's been bumped off.
Yeah.
So it's just a perception thing, isn't it?
Yeah, there can be quite an important moral issue, can't there? That sort of tends to take the plot in different directions as well.
Makes you feel like a survivor.
Yes, that's a really good point.
Right, next we've got Death in the East by Mukherjee.
I love this book so much. I was asked I'd never read any of his books, and I was asked to interview him at an event in Cambridge. And this was when Death in the East was coming out, first of all. And I thought, oh, better read it quickly, you know. And it was one of those books, I didn't want to read it quickly. I wanted to just absorb it. You know, I wanted to just
savor
enjoy
it.
it. Yeah, really did. Yeah, I loved it. It's set in India from memory, I think it's the 20s. It's a really nice book, and he's actually a really nice guy as well. So that's the perfect combination. It's always a bit disappointing if you meet an author and they're, you know, not so amiable, but I would say also that crime authors tend to be really nice. I think it's because we get all our angst out on the page, you know.
Yeah.
We've dealt with it all. We're like, okay, I hate the neighbour, I'll kill them on page 3, off I go. And then you're really, you know, chill for the rest of the time.
The thing is, the interesting thing is, back to the Postscript Murders, it is about crime writers.
Yeah.
The whole book is about crime writers.
Okay.
Yeah, so and their relationships and history and all sorts. It's fun. I could tell that she was enjoying herself with it. So, but that certainly has been true in all the crime writers we've talked to. You're all very nice people.
Yeah. Yes. And Ellie, I mean, Ellie Griffiths has been talked to us 2 or 3 times in, you know, when we've been able to ask authors to come and actually talk to us in person. Yeah, and it's been excellent. So actually, let's hope next year, Alison, we might be able to invite you to come and talk to us in person.
I would love to come in.
Excellent.
I would love to.
Yeah. Okay, right. Your last choice then is Harlan Coben, The Boy from the Woods.
Yes. Now, I've read every single Harlan Coben book apart from this one, because this is his latest. And I can't read it because my sister's buying it for me for Christmas. So I was going to treat myself to it, and she said, I've got your Christmas present sorted. And so I'm really pleased I'm getting it for Christmas, but I'm really disappointed that I haven't already been able to read it, because it wouldn't be the right thing to do. But I love Harlan Coben's writing. It's very pacey. He always brings you very, very close to what's happening in the story. His plotting is excellent. And he does this thing with point of view where he sort of hops in and out of other people's heads, but he does it so flawlessly that, you know, it never feels disjointed. You are just moving from one person's point of view to the next. And I just love his writing. He was probably one of the big influences when I was first writing. I sent my book off to my agent, and she said, okay, I really like your writing, but the plot needs some work. And she gave me a reading list of 3 or 4 authors, and one of them was Harlan Coben. And I think he was the 2nd or 3rd that I read. I hadn't quite reached the end of the list anyway. And I gave up on the rest of the list. I just kept reading his back catalogue until I'd got through them all. And yeah, I've probably, of American authors, he's the one for me.
Yeah,
Excellent.
well, it's been lovely talking to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to come along in person when I can.
That it would be great. We really like to fill this room with readers and
Yes.
to have them have a conversation with the author. We've had many a good evening here, and we look forward to bringing people to meet you again as soon as we can.
That would be fantastic. I love book events because, you know, you can really get some interesting questions and answers going, and you know, a lot of the time a writer spends by themselves. So, you know, getting out and meeting readers is kind of like the box of chocolates at the end of the book, if you like. So thank you very much. And I hope you all have a fantastic Christmas. When, you know, it's on the horizon now, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels as though we're nearly there.
Yeah. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.